So on page 7, we have this factoring worksheet. So we're going to remind ourselves how to factor, and as we're doing our activity today, I want you to keep this open. The very first thing you always do is to look for the GCF. GCF stands for what? Greatest common factor. So that's always going to be the first thing you do, is to look at the greatest common factor, okay? Then you're going to see, is it a difference of squares? If it's a difference of squares, it's a binomial, right? Remember, it's two terms. That's a binomial. So if you see two terms, let's just put a big 2 in here. That means there are two terms. They have to be perfect squares, and they have to be, what else? Perfect squares, a binomial, and subtraction. So we're looking for two terms. Let's do these examples here. X squared minus 64. First, is there a greatest common factor?
No.
What's the greatest common factor? Does 8 divide out of x squared? No, so there is no GCF. So on this one, we're going to have x plus 8, x minus 8. So everyone should be writing on their notes page on page 7. X minus 8 and x plus 8 right here in this example. Page 7 of the Unit 1 packet. Okay, what about the second one? Is there a greatest common factor between 18m squared n and 2n cubed? Mitchell?
Yes, 2n squared.
2n.
Wait, no, 2n.
Just 2n, good. Okay, so we're going to divide this by 2n. We're going to divide this by 2n. Where does that 2n go? Out to the front. Okay. So 18 divided by 2 leaves me 9m squared minus n squared. Is that completely factored? Ashley's noticing that 9m squared and n squared are all perfect squares, right? So we can factor this again. This is one of those ones where I said, remember, it's hidden sometimes. I'll try to write that underneath it so you can see it. So we're going to have 3m minus n, right? That's the square root. And 3m plus n. Good. And Ashley says, remember to put that 2 in there. Okay? So that's how we do difference of squares. The trinomial is how many terms? 3. So let's put a 3 here. And then let's make sure that we notice that what's the coefficient of x squared? 1. So let's put a 1 there and maybe underline it so that we remember when a is 1, okay, when the a value is 1, we're just going to x factor. Okay, so we can make ourselves a note here to x factor. I'm going to move the screen down so that I can do the problem with you. Okay. All right. So we're going to see which two numbers multiply to get negative 42. Put your x here, please, so that this is a quick reference for you. Multiply to get negative 42 and add to get negative 1. Leanna is helping us out and saying that it's 7 and 6. But what do you have to be careful about, Leanna? One of them has to be negative. Which one has to be negative, Leanna? The 7, right? Now, do I have to go the long way and split the middle and do all that jazz?
No.
Lexi's shaking her head no. What am I allowed to just do? Set up your what? Just set up your parentheses, okay? You get an x in each one. One is plus 6, one is minus 7. And then that's all the way finished, right? Okay, what about example 2? We're on page 7 in your Unit 1 packet. That second example, what do we always look for first? Greatest common factor. Braxton, what's the greatest common factor in that second example? 2. So we're going to divide a 2 out of the whole thing. That leaves me with w squared plus 10w plus 25. What two numbers multiply to get 25 and add to get 10? Why don't you factor this one on your own? What two numbers multiply to get 25 and add to get 10? Do that on your own. Ryan, what two factors are you choosing? 5 and 5. Okay, so we'll set up our two parentheses. W plus 5, W plus 5. And then what do we have on the outside there?
2.
A 2. Is there a different way I could write this answer when I have a W plus 5 and a W plus 5? Is there another way I can write that answer? Taylor?
W plus 5 squared.
W plus 5 squared. So it's the same thing to do W plus 5 and then put a square on the outside. Those are the same things. I will count either one correct. It doesn't matter to me which one you use, okay? All right. Trinomial again. This time we also have 3 terms. But what do you notice they say here? A is actually a number, right? And so when A is a number, they do the slip and slide method. We're not doing the slip and slide. I know that sounds like a lot of fun. But Miss Carolyn and I tried the slip and slide. And it has a lot of fractions in it. So we avoided the slip and slide because we were thinking of only our amazing students and how much they love fractions.
And we love piece of that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You can pay me later. All right. So when we do this A method, remember we need to do A times C. So let's make ourselves a note here. A times C in the X factor. And then our B value goes down here, right? We do A times C in the top. And then our B value goes down below. Is there anything I can do before I start X factoring? Aspen?
Divide everything by 3.
Good. Aspen notices that we have a greatest common factor of 3. Okay, so we're going to divide everything by 3. Leaves you with 10x squared minus 9x plus 2. Good. Okay, now we're going to X factor. So remember we have to do 10 times 2. What are we doing with that 3 while we're X factoring?
We're saving it for later.
We're saving it for later. Good. We're going to save that 3 for later.
Or you could just bring it down.
You could, but sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. So we're going to just save that 3 for later. So 10 times 2 is 20, and they have to add to get a negative 9. Someone who I haven't heard from yet. Ben, can you sit up, please? Dalton.
Negative 5, negative 4.
Negative 5, negative 4. Excellent. Okay. Who remembers the first step here? Mitchell?
What, like after you split the middle?
No, before you split the middle. What do we do to go to the next step? Bring down what?
Oh, you need to bring down your 10x squared.
All right, guys, please on this paper, please draw the arrows like I'm drawing so that you have this as an example, that you know what's coming down, what's getting split. Okay? What's going to go better with a 10x squared, a negative 5 or a negative 4? Negative 5. So we could put the negative 5 first. Remember, it doesn't matter which order. And Vinny, what do you have to remember? You always put with the 2 in the middle things.
2 in the middle.
What do you always have to put with the 2 numbers in the middle?
A plus sign.
The variables with it, the x with it, right?
Yeah, the x's.
Okay, and then minus 4x. And then draw an arrow that your 2 comes down, please. I want you to draw these arrows on this paper. You don't have to do it on your actual homework. but on this paper so that you have an example to go back to and look. So from this point forward, you're not going to have to ask Miss Carolyn and I, how do you do this? Because you have an example here. What do we do now? Good. Group them together. See if you can finish this out, please. Remember, if the first term is negative in the parentheses, then you divide the negative out. So we have 5x minus 2 and 2x minus 1. And then we have our 3 that we bring down. Who has that correct on their paper? Did I finish it too fast? Make sure you make the adjustments. You pull a negative 2 out of that second group because that 4 that's in the first term is negative. So that negative also comes with it. Ask a question.
Oh, it's not done.
This one isn't done?
Don't you have to put your 5x minus 2 together?
Oh, can you see this over here?
Oh, no, sorry, because
okay.
his head was in the way.
I moved it over here. Yes. Yeah.
You're fine,
Any questions on that example?
I got a big head. So.
Okay, what about grouping? How many terms are there with grouping? 4 terms. So put a big 4 right there and circle it. That's when you have 4 terms. You know how to do this. Group the first 2 together, group the second 2 together, and pull things out. Go ahead and do this example. Daniel, what are you pulling out of the first group?
Equal a squared.
Good. Okay, pull out an a squared from the first group. Leaves you with 2a minus b. Olivia, what did you pull out of the second group?
5.
Just a 5. Good. Leaves you with 2a minus b. Okay. Now I have the same thing in parentheses, which is good. I want the same thing in parentheses. So I write that one time. And then I collect what I pulled out, a squared plus 5. Remember, your parentheses should be touching because it means multiplication, so your parentheses need to be right next to each other. Okay? Any questions on this problem? Yeah, Vinny?
How did you get the a squared?
Be-
Well, the a squared.
Because I looked to see what do these two terms have in common.
Right.
And they have an a squared. So I divided by a squared on both terms. And when you divide, you're really subtracting your exponents. So a cubed minus a squared will just give you a there. Okay? All right. I want you to keep this out while we're doing our next activity.